Our first decision is how many and what days of the week the athlete is training. No matter what we believe would be ideal, the real determinant is often what the athlete is capable of in practical terms. If you're watching this, you're not coaching captive professional weightlifters with no conflicting obligations. You're working with athletes who have jobs, school, maybe other sports or activities, and other limitations on their schedules. The most common number of days a week for a weightlifter is 5. This is usually manageable practically and allows for effective training with a range of volume, average intensities, and frequencies of individual lifts. But we can write effective programming for anything from 2 to 6 days a week as appropriate and allowed. Again, typically the younger the athlete, the more frequency is manageable and productive, and the older the athlete, the fewer days a week training can be. The more advanced an athlete, the higher the frequency usually needs to be until reaching a peak in their career, after which it will need to be reduced progressively to continue training effectively as recovery ability declines with age. Unless it's obviously a bad choice, it's a good idea to at least start a new athlete with the same number of training days they've been using previously, and then adjust as you gather data from their training. We can structure a 5-day week 2 typical ways. The most common is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, followed by Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. This lets us distribute training and rest days well and creates a schedule that allows effective timing of heavy days. A 4-day week is typically best arranged as Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and a 3-day week Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Saturday. In these cases, you have more flexibility in which days of the week you actually use for training. In any case, you're going to run into situations in which your athletes have the worst possible schedules for training, like medical or first responder personnel with constantly changing work days. In my mind, the best way to approach this is to start by creating a conventional microcycle that's easy to lay out and understand, and then make the necessary adjustments to accommodate the athlete's needs. So let's start with a conventional 5-day week and work from there. A couple things to understand before we even think about exercises, reps, and intensity in detail. First, we want to alternate big and small training days, and by that I mean days with higher and lower workloads in terms of intensity, volume, number of exercises, and somewhat more subjectively, exercise selection. This lets us train multiple consecutive days while allowing more recovery for the next big day. We also want to strategically place our rest days to help maximize performance and recovery. So in a traditional 5-day training week, we'll usually have Thursday as a rest day, both to recover from 3 consecutive training days and to ensure adequate recovery for Friday, which is commonly a big training day, often including a heavy total and something like squats. Then we have a rest day Sunday to recover from the week and prepare for the next. And it's the same idea with a Monday through Thursday setup. In both of these schedules, we're going to see Monday and Wednesday as higher workload days and Tuesdays as a lower workload day. Then we'll either have Friday as a big day and Saturday as a small day, or we'll put a low workload on Thursday and the last big one on Saturday. Generally, Monday and Wednesday can be pretty much the same workload. Then Tuesday will be the lowest in the week since it's both after and before a big day, meaning we need to keep it low both to allow recovery from Monday and not create too much fatigue that would disrupt Wednesday. Friday can pretty much be the same as Monday and Wednesday, but we may actually have a bit higher workload. If we're doing heavy snatch and clean and jerk, plus somewhat heavy squatting, that's going to be a pretty significant day, and we're probably going to be doing a bit more than on Monday or Wednesday, when we're likely just focusing on one competition lift and then some pulls and or squats. And then Saturday will be a lower workload, but can probably be a bit more than Tuesday because we have a rest day after rather than another big training day. If we're looking at the big Saturday layout, we're moving Friday's workout to Saturday. We could probably get away with just moving Saturday's workout to Thursday, but we may want to adjust a bit. For example, we may make Thursday rather than Tuesday the lowest workload if we want to really ensure adequate recovery for Saturday, since that 4-day run is a lot of work accumulated. This is going to depend on the exercise selection to some extent. For example, the volume and intensity will matter a bit less if you're using Tuesday and Thursday as more jerk and overhead focus days, with Monday and Wednesday as more snatch, clean, pull, and squat days. Even with similar intensity and volume, overhead work is going to be a bit less systemically fatiguing, meaning we can still typically push it relatively hard on these smaller days while still getting the necessary recovery effect we need. In some cases, our small days may actually have more reps and even more exercises than the big days if a large portion of that volume is comprised of light technique type work. For now, just keep in mind that the way we lay out a microcycle is not just a matter of volume and intensity distribution. We have to consider those variables on a detailed and specific level with regard to how we're actually calculating them and what exercises they're associated with. We also have to consider the distribution of exercises across the week to ensure we're spreading out exposure to each lift as well as possible, rather than allowing them to get clumped up together simply because our volume and intensity numbers make that seem correct. We can easily modify this to a 4-day week by removing one of the easier days. We can probably keep all the bigger days as is because we're replacing a small day with a rest day, meaning we're increasing recovery even without changing anything in the remaining workouts. I usually prefer a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday schedule. Monday and Tuesday don't need to change, and we just shift Wednesday and Friday a day later. You can just as easily keep the Monday, Wednesday, Friday workouts in place and move Tuesday to Saturday if that works better for an athlete's schedule. And for a 3-day week, we just want to spread the days out evenly with rest days in between. And ideally, we have the hardest day followed by 2 rest days to recover for the next week. The question we have when changing training frequency is if we need to reduce total work or just days. In other words, are we reducing the number of training days because the athlete needs less volume, or only because that's the only schedule their life allows? If we're reducing volume, that'll occur naturally by removing days. If we're just reducing days, we can distribute the cut days' work to the remaining days as well as possible. Ultimately, the fewer training days we have to work with, the less we can do in terms of volume and exercise variety. It's easy to have 4 or 5 snatch variations in a 5-day week. It's very hard to do that much in a 3-day week because all of that snatch work is taking up space needed for other training. So the less total training time we have, the more creatively and strategically we need to choose exercises and distribute volume. We need to maximize the effect of each exercise for as many aspects of the desired adaptations as possible, rather than adding exercises to address more aspects. We can also easily create a 6-day training week by adding another small session on Thursday. If we're keeping the same conventional structure with Friday being the biggest workload, we need Thursday to be the lowest workload to let the athlete recover adequately from the previous days. This is a good day to do a lot of light technique-oriented training and accessory work that will create very little fatigue and even encourage recovery and mobility with some quality movement rather than the athlete being sedentary on a day off.